Yeah, I can't talk about that and record at the same time. Okay, this is it. Okay. For those of you that followed the notes, this is where I stopped, correct? Establish their own fraternal lodges. Okay. All right. So now, and I hope that you see we're trying to build a progression even with our assignments. So first we got people to Ellis Island and Angel Island, talked about why they came, talked about what the process was. And then yesterday we talked about, okay, now they're here. And that immigrant story that you read were about immigrants trying to do those things, find jobs, find a place to live. And we're going to continue with that look at today with the hostility. So immigrants often dealt with nativism and hostility from native-born white Americans. And again, I want to make sure we all understand this, right? Unless you're Native American, which very few of us are, we're all immigrants, right? We are all from someplace else. This is a country that is built on immigrants. And it is something that should come with a sense of pride that a nation with people from all over the place came together to build this country. But what happens often with that, as you lose contact with that culture, you feel different and separate. And some of these native-born white Americans begin to feel that way. Religious differences, and I would really underline that word competition. That's what really usually brings out any kind of hostilities toward other groups of people. Competition for jobs and housing. And it's still what happens today. It's one of the reasons that people who tend to be more anti-immigrant always talk about is there people are coming to take your jobs. Competition for jobs, because obviously jobs are necessary. You have to feed your family, you have to pay your rent. So that is always a subject that is difficult for immigrants to become a part of. And this is what's going to lead to those divisions, prejudices, and especially during economic recessions, those competitions. And an economic recession means companies, factories aren't hiring, and so there are less jobs, and so there are more people competing for those jobs. And if we remember a couple of slides ago, these people coming are really, really poor. So they will work for a whole lot less than Americans currently living in the United States. And so because they would work for less pay, that's where this competition, and that's where some of the nativism and the hostility happens towards these immigrants. Religion is going to be a really big problem. Do I have anyone in here that's Catholic? Any Catholics? We usually don't have very many. Protestants especially are not going to work with Catholics. There will actually be signs in large Catholic communities like Boston, Catholics need not apply. No Catholics welcome. And that should kind of tinge in the back of your head like, wait a second, this is a country that's supposed to supply religious freedoms. And what you should note from that is it's not so much about, again, the freedom, it's about the competition of Catholics. And I'm going to be very politically incorrect and talk about, but one of the things about typical Catholics, again, this is a politically incorrect generalization, is because they don't believe in things like birth control, is they have giant, large families. And most Catholics do have large families. And when you have that large family, that means you got a lot of workers. You got a lot of kids that can work and take jobs from other people. So that will be a problem. Some Americans will sign restrictive contracts, and that means Americans meaning factory owners. So factory owners will sign contracts that they won't sell or rent property to Catholics or Jews or African Americans. And that will happen for a really long period of time. It's one of the reasons that the Equal Housing Authority is an important part and plays an important role in the United States in the 1960s and 70s, so that people are not discriminated against of buying or selling homes. And here's the sad part. So native intellectuals. So these are smart people. When we talk about intellectuals, these are professors. These are people that work at Harvard and Yale, esteemed universities, will back their prejudice with science, with flawed science that will link immigrants' physical features to crime and or lower IQs. That is something that has taken decades to overcome. And some of those people in those targeted areas will say it's still not done yet. It would be based on science, like measuring certain parts of your body. They did it for women forever because our heads are small. Because our heads are small, our brains must be small. And so, no, you can't have a bank account, and no, you can't have a job, and no, you can't go to college based on the size of our heads. Some of you females in here have really teeny heads. Teeny. Emma, you have a teeny little head. Tansy, you have a little teeny head. That has nothing to do with the brain inside of you, but that was used as science. That was an indicator. And that flawed science drove a lot of these people who said, well, if scientists are saying the size of your head is directly proportional to how smart you are, then how could it not be? How could these people with doctors after their names, they would use many of these things. So we had it also tied with crime. And that, again, creates this stigma around different groups of people that normal middle-class people would say, well, these people are way smarter than we are. They must know more things than we do about this. So it becomes an even harder thing for these immigrants to overcome. And many of these things still will linger well into the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I'm just going to put an asterisk here at the moment and talking about these native prejudice ideas. 1964 was the Voter Rights Act, which finally removed all the restrictions on African Americans being able to vote, being able to read, a poll tax. That's the year I was born, people. The year I was born in 1964. That's how short of a time period it's been since these prejudices have lingered on. My mom, who was a teenage mom, I was born in 1964. My mom was 17. My mom went to a segregated high school in the South. Segregated high school. My class that graduated in 1982 was the first class in our county that went to school K through 12 integrated. I started kindergarten. I didn't go there because I wasn't there, but they started kindergarten in 1969. So when I know this feels like ancient history to you guys, but it's not that long ago when things like scientists would say these things, which would make people part of their lifestyle and their lexicon. Like, well, that's what they say at Harvard, so that must be true. It's really hard to overcome that. In 1882, Congress started to restrict immigration. So in 1882, we decided to say, hey, we probably should put some stoppers. Prior to 1882, there was no immigration policy. The immigration policy was if you get to the United States, you live here for 5 years, you're a citizen of the United States. And I would venture to say, again, that every single person in this room whose parents are European, that's how they got citizenship. That's how they got citizenship. But in 1882, Congress said, hey, we should probably look at this, which is probably something that the government should have done. One of the things that they are concerned about is in Europe in 1882 is a rise of communism, socialism and communism. And we're concerned about people bringing those ideas into the United States. So we have two things happening. The Chinese Exclusion Act is fairly self-explanatory, excluding, prohibited immigration of any Chinese. You're done. No Chinese. You're not coming into the country and you're not being nationalized. Nationalized is the process that you go through to become a citizen of the United States. That's what you would still do if you came to the United States from another country. You follow the procedures and take a test, which is a really hard test, and then you become naturalized, and then you're a naturalized citizen of the United States. As a naturalized citizen, you can do almost everything in the United States. Does anyone know the one thing that you cannot do as a naturalized citizen of the United States? Become president. Yep, you cannot become president. That's the one thing. You can become the governor of California, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a nationalized citizen. He was born in Austria. He's governor of California. You can be that, but you cannot be president. Then the other one, Congress is now going to look back to Europe and say, we got to put some stoppers on Europe. And that law is going to be, you can't be a criminal, which that's fairly easy. Did you commit a crime or did you not commit a crime? Or immoral. What does that word mean? Because I am fairly certain if I made a list of things that I think are immoral and you guys made a list, we would have very different lists. Half the things I think you guys do are immoral. Like half, at least, that you don't even bat an eye about, which is fine. That's the way that goes. My mom was the same way. She didn't let me buy certain records because she thought they were devil music. I get it. Now they're on commercials, and I remind her of that. Hey, you know the background? That's the album you wouldn't let me have. But that's one of the wiggle room for governments. Who decides what's immoral? And how is that decided? A pauper, does anybody know what a pauper is? A pauper is a poor person. So if you're poor, that certainly is also in the eyes of the beholder, what people think are poor. I am certain if all of us went and wrote on a piece of paper what we think poor is, there would be a wide range of what that would be. A wide range. Some of you live in conditions that would be part of this pauper. Does that mean you don't get to come to the United States? Or likely to need public assistance. And this is always the one that governments have somewhat of a right to look at, right? Do we let in people that we're going to have to support? And again, when we say we, that's us, the taxpayers. So our last two slides with this one is change. Immigrants change America. That is no question that the United States is built in this time period with immigrant work power. They are the ones that created the workforce for all of these people to become great and have great wealth. Carnegie, all of those people. They built railroads, they worked in factories, they worked in mills, they worked in mines. So in that part, they drastically change America economically. Culturally, they definitely change and become a part of American culture. And I've mentioned this before. You can find it in 1,000 different ways, but food is the most obvious. And then increasingly, they become active in labor unions and politics and demand reform. It's going to take a long, long time for that to happen. Not until we get to the 1920s and 30s will that actually happen. Our last slide just asks you to think about that. Why did immigrants come and what impact did they have on society? Pretty certain when I do this, those of you that take notes because you're thinking about the test, pretty sure that's a test question, right? So, and I've given you those answers there. So make sure you take a look at this for test purposes. All right, so our assignment today, Kevin reminded me when he came in because he wanted to kind of get a jump on it that this is one of those assignments where I have pictures, that there's a certain way that you need to open this so that you can see the pictures. So I think that I can remember slightly how to do that. So let me get over here. And so the assignment is an oral history. And that's one of the things that historians rely on for accuracy in reporting. So this is what you have to do, Kevin. You see the little blue box, preview the document? Does everybody see that? That's what you need to click. And you actually need to open it in Canvas. That's when you can see the pictures. So instead of clicking the brown link, click this little preview document, and then it will open in Canvas. And then from there, I think you can do something with it. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody, can you see it now, Kevin? The pictures? Okay, I knew there was something that you had to do with it. All right, I'm going to use, for the sake of purposes, I'm going to go to mine on my desktop so I can actually see what I'm doing. Maybe I can find it. Nope, I'm going to stay there. It's too hard. All right. So one of the things, again, that historians use are oral histories. And that's talking to people that experienced the event. So when a historian interviews a person who is a witness or a participant to a historical event, they interview, and it's called oral history. Oral histories provide interesting perspectives, details about what happened long ago. When conducting oral histories, historians usually record it, and they follow certain steps. So your assignment is to look at the photographs, choose one, and make sure you tell me which photo, and of recently arrived immigrants from Ellis Island. These are real photographs of real people. Choose one of the people in the photograph, because most of them have more than one, and then you're going to ask the 8 questions, and conduct an interview like a historian would for one of these people. Your answers must be detailed, thorough answer. Don't give me, here's what I always look for, that your answers show that you know what happened in Ellis Island, that you know why immigrants came. So when I ask these things, I want to make sure that you are really paying attention to what happened in 1880. And I say, could you ask this of anybody that's gone through something? Could you have asked the same thing of somebody coming, and would the answers be the same? So please make sure you provide some specificity, like using Ellis Island, using those push-pull factors. Why did you come? What made you come? What do you expect to find here? I have some questions already listed. One question and answer should be about the trip. One question and answer should be about why they came. One question and answer should be about what they hope to find. And the 4 others you have to come up with yourself. So I give you 4 to start with. You come up with the other 4. However you set that up is fine. So for instance, in photograph 1, there's 3 people in that one. So if you choose photograph 1, tell me, I chose photograph 1, I chose the person lying on the bench, or I chose the lady sitting on the edge of the bench. In photograph 3, there's 4 people. Please don't choose the baby. I've had some people try to choose the baby. The baby can't answer anything. And I think probably what's interesting about photograph 3, because that lady looks like the grandma, that lady's the mom. That lady is the mom of those. She's not the grandma. Photograph, I'm sorry, they show up different. Photograph 4 is another whole entire family. I'm sorry, that's not photograph 3. Photograph 4 is a mom and a little girl. That little girl is old enough to ask questions to, so you could choose the little girl. And then my personal favorite is photo 5 with the big guy smiling in the center. So you could be the big guy, happy guy, or a guy that looks concerned and worried. Okay? What?
So the guy on 5 we kill somebody.
Yeah. What? So,
The guy in front.
oh yeah, he looks very concerned and very worried, like something bad's going to happen to him. All right, so this is what we'll be working on today. You have the entire class period on Friday to work on this. Monday, we'll kind of start into another one, but there won't be a new assignment on Monday, but we will start taking notes in the next section. Anybody have questions about that? Questions about any of that? Okay.